So we can,
That's what she thinks.
and maybe next year I'll be here with my art. Maybe if
Might
this
be
will
the
continue.
juror. Maybe you'll be the juror.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
So thank you all for coming, and we have here Heather and Eric, Diane and Brian, who have pieces over here. Yay! And of course we have our jurors. It's these. Matt Anderson and Tate Simonson. And we were last fall, I think, we were discussing you two, how about being a jurors, and then you came up with this team lore, which you are going to talk a little bit more about soon. So first they are going to talk about lore, then it's awards,
Yep.
and then discussion. Doesn't sound like a plan. So, Tate and Matt, you want to talk about lore? What was the idea of lore, and how was it to be a judge? How does it feel to be on that side of the, as an artist?
It's not fun to be a judge.
Yeah,
I mean,
go ahead and.
you learn a lot, but I mean, it's not. It's different every time I've jury shows. I just started talking.
It's fine.
Go for it. Okay.
I think a lot of like Matt and I have I don't know, we've worked together a few different times and like pretty good banter, and it was Win proposed that we might juror a show together. It was really kind of like just thinking about what it could be about, and I think both of us are very narrative driven in kind of like what we make, and we both really enjoy the story. I'm a very avid reader, so like for me, the narrative of something is really important. One of the books that I recently read, one of the big things about it is like the journey rather than the destination, and the journey of the piece, like how it got to where it went and like what it went through. There's a lot of reflective in my own practice, like I'm really about the exploration of the making, and the end result's great. And if you get something awesome that happens, that's really fun and exciting, but it's really about just like trying things and exploring. So like with that, like the lore behind a piece could be a lot of things, and there's a lot of like narrative that can go into something that like pulls from things that we know and experience and are familiar with, but it's also about like this lore that like is independent. What is the lore of the actual piece? Like what's that story that's built into it? So I think Matt threw the idea out of lore, and I was just like, I think we both at first, I don't know if it was maybe it was an offhanded comment, the first one, and then we were just like, we kind of like then circled back to it, and we're like, yeah, I think this could be really fun because like it's wide open, and it allows for someone to like, a lot of different shows have a specific guideline, can have a broad umbrella of what could be in it, but lore I think also too has a really big umbrella of what it could mean to you. So I think that's for us. What lore means to me is very different than it might be for Matt and then the artists. So I think using that word, I think we're really excited about the potential of what we could see come back, and really curious on what we might see for the show, and then how we would sort through that and get to like pick pieces to be in this show. So I think there was a lot of that for us, for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I didn't think of that until right now, but part of that was like getting excited, like theming a show, and then getting excited to see what comes back. Not having any idea what that's going to be. Right? And that's part of storytelling and myth making, and lore is a particular kind of storytelling where it's, for me, the history of stories and kind of how they develop. That's where my mind goes. And I was just talking earlier about just kind of this impulse to make meaning out of everything. Like as what a person learns is to make meaning by association, right? So you don't have to continually relive the same situation over and over again. So if I see somebody walking a dog when I'm a little kid, I have to figure out what they're doing. What's that dog on the end of a leash and what's that person doing? And my parents will tell me what it is, or somebody will point it out, and I'll figure it out. And over time, I can see that same situation happen again, and I don't have to spend time worrying about it or trying to figure out what it means. Right? I just know what it is. But if it happens out of context, if I see somebody walking a dog in the mall, all of a sudden it's going to catch my eye again, and I have to like kind of recontextualize it. And then I start to settle back into it, and I understand what it is a little bit more. In other words, meaning making out of just everything, especially things that maybe are scary or don't make or make us feel uncertain, to find a sense of certainty and safety in a way that we can predict what may happen next in our lives, create stories around it, right? And some of the first stories that we even tell kids are meaning-making machines, and they're this big, and all they're doing is figuring the world out. As parents, I will tell them fictional stories, not factual stories. I tell them like Billy Goat's Gruff and Three Little Pigs and all these myth stories, like, and they believe these things. It helps them make sense of the world, but not in a bad way. It's just that's how people, through storytelling, make sense out of life and finds usually to find like safety and security, or just like give something a definition, right? And just seeing all the images that come back out of all the different myths and stories and roots and bases is really exciting to see. But that's the part of lore that fascinates me, is like how we make meaning out of ambiguous things. Because as artists, that's kind of what we do all the time. But that's why lore was, I think, for why I mentioned the Tate. I mean, like, Tate is an avid reader and knows a whole lot more about like storytelling than I do. So it's just we just connect there. Awards.
Sure. Would you tell a little bit about that, your piece that you made over there?
So Tate made that piece as the wooden one with the skulls, and in other words, the one that doesn't fit within the parameters of the project, keep it 10 inches by 10 inches. We made that one. So I didn't, in coming up with the theme lore, and after receiving the pieces back and joining with the pieces that were going to be presented today, I think then we kind of, at least for me, understood that the expectation was we would make a piece too and contribute it to the show. So we had to think, like, what do we want to make as for our piece? So I think keeping it open to interpretation, but presenting enough things, that visual elements that have strong association, like skulls, right? Strong associations, right? That what happens when you place those at the bottom of, like, that's just rough cut tree edges that I use. Those were destined for my wood box, right? I pulled them out and reshaped them into this monolithic shape, and then this shape becomes like a meaning too. Like you can twist, even the way you just put things, no matter what you do, you're gonna start making meaning out of things. So there isn't, I know I didn't have a particular meaning that we were trying to put together, other than Tate has a laser. We have these pieces, and if we put them together, what kind of story comes out of these things as we put them together? Almost like collage style, but dimensional like that.
Yeah, I agree. There was a lot of just kind of brainstorming and like what could we use that we have on hand that we could form a piece that's more mixed media kind of work. We wanted to do something because we didn't want it necessarily be like representing something that could be definitively in the show. We wanted to do something that was a part of the show, but maybe sat outside of it. And we were okay with kind of breaking those restrictions, and not, because we're jurors of the show, we thought we wouldn't follow the guidelines, and we'd just make something that we felt that fit within the lore kind of idea. And then with that, we have these pieces that we thought about all the different things that we had available. We're both artists, and I'm a sculptor, and I just collect things. I don't always even know what they're going to be for, but I just have things that I collected. One of the main components of that is a giant glass tube that's inside of it. I I teach, and at our school we have a laser, and something happened with our laser, and I had to get a tube to replace it. I pulled this giant laser tube out, and I'm like, well, what am I gonna do with this? You know, I'm not gonna throw it away. I'm gonna put it somewhere, mount it in my office or something like that. And Matt and I are talking, and it just almost seemed like natural. Well, of course we're gonna use the laser tube because it's like this powerful part of the machine that we have at our school, you know, and what can we build around it? And it was just a really like very organic process between Matt and I with the way we work together and just how our conversations go. They just keep going. It's like a rhizome of thought that it just keeps building. And we're like just thinking of all these components that we have and what can we put together that could create some sort of story that like would engage the viewer, that could maybe be a representation of the show as itself. So it's really just pulling our pieces together that we had, that we thought could be engaging, that might tell a story from the components that we had. We didn't want to like necessarily, we were making something new, but we didn't necessarily want to like, I don't know, have it in this other category of like some of the work that we regularly make. I personally didn't have anything that I was like, oh yeah, that's lore, you know, and I was something that's been on my shelf, and I'm like, yes, let's use this thing. Although I did pull those skulls off of the shelf, but I mean, there's one of the components for a larger piece. So we just wanted to make something that was more ephemeral, wasn't something that was set in just kind of an installation, and not something that was like a defined piece of work that was hung up on a wall, but something that we would then tear in, be all separate components later.
Yeah. I think maybe that's part of choosing the theme for the show too. Outside of maybe, you know, having a theme like lore is just hopefully just something different to put a call like that out there. And I know as an art maker, sometimes it's nice to be given a structure that's new, just to try to see what you can do with it. I think we have just a lot of like new learning in that. Awards time. Yeah, this is, it took us we just spent a lot of time walking around this room trying to categorize the awards that we're about to give out. We have our personal, we try to stick with the theme, make sure that we're sticking with the theme more. Instead of maybe the works that just personally we just enjoy, right? We then have to back away and say, but does it fit within the context of the show lore? So based on that, these are the works that we chose. I'll start with honorable mentions first. In no particular order of the honorable mention categories, we gave up 5. Heather Zalarsky. And then we also, sometimes we would award everything the artist submitted, and sometimes a selection of pieces, and if the artist just submitted one, sometimes it was out. So Heather Zalarsky, that is with the 3, I think that one's Lauren Tate.
Yeah, it is.
Heather's is the 3 felt pieces. Yeah. With the aliens, because that is something that's different about lore too. There's like aliens that used to be lore are creepily becoming more fact as the Air Force starts to like say like, oh no, Santa Claus, and yeah, so very nice pieces. The other honorable mention is to a book, Lauren Zalewski, Cliff Thief. And Diane Paulson. Absolutely, Diane. And actually, okay, I'll go through the words, but Diane, if you have time to kind of, I don't know much about what you're doing,
Okay.
other than reading, like I would love it if you'd
You
like to
talk about it a little
if you'd
bit?
like to, I'd appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I am craft-based, fiber-based, love all kinds of craft, weaving, spinning, knitting, all that sort of thing. And I'm always looking for something new to do, which I probably shouldn't, but it's fun. And so I was in Minneapolis and I saw these, they're called Sing the Balls, and they're from Sweden and Denmark, and originally in the 1800s. And I can't find a book on it. I saw this woman online, teaches down in Minneapolis, and so I decided to take her class online. And so I just learned to do it online. And there's starting to be a crowd of people that are doing them, but it's very, very, very rare in the United States. And I don't know how many people do them in Sweden, but there isn't a book on it yet. So it's kind of fun to just experiment. And the black lines are kind of your guidelines, and then you can fill in color. Or you can, on that one on the right, is just sort of free form, so you just do your basic line to start with, and then follow that, and it's all done with the blanket stitch. And some of you probably know what a blanket stitch is if you do quilting or sewing or whatever. So, and it starts out with a ball. I usually use, I do tamari balls too, which are Japanese balls, but you start out with a rice pocket and a nylon stocking, and then you wrap it with wool, and then you work on top of the wool. So, that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Terry Frew, Second Sight. It's a lace piece, and if you look at the dead center of that one, there's an eyeball right in the middle, and we just thought that was an interesting use of material. That piece. And last honorable mention is Dina Novak, all the way back across the room. This piece is right there. And for the 3 $100 awards, Allison McKay, that's those 3 small ones. I think we both felt the presentation and cultural history was shining through in those words. Amy Broderick is next. And John Decker. And for Best in Show, it chose as Myrna Canto. All 3 of those works as a body. So again, we were looking for pieces that kind of exemplified storytelling and narrative, and retelling of stories too. Does anybody have any discussion? I did see that there was two younger kids in here earlier. I saw 2 kids in here earlier, and I was hoping that they would stay too.
Oh, those are my kids. They have to go to Star Wars Day at the library.
Oh, Star
That's
Wars.
more exciting.
That's more.
Another more, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Or maybe not.
Yeah, exactly. You never know. And thank you all for coming. Thank you, everybody. Any questions? Objections, thoughts? Okay.
I think everyone of us in this room know this, but I'm just gonna point it out. If you want to buy something, you pay us and we put a red dot on it and you take it home in June when the show is, because we wanna keep the exhibit all together.
I don't know if you have put any price on yours.
I might need